think the moment when I realized that I'm an activist was the moment when I quit my job as an architect. There was a moment I can't return, and I dedicated my life towards our oceans.
I don't think I ever had a moment where I knew I'd be an activist. When we started, we were just a couple of kids wanting to plant some trees to tackle the climate crisis.
I knew when I was tiny and I was trying to get my parents to recycle, they used to make fun of me and my siblings made fun of me. Little rebel, what are you up to? And now, 30 years later, they're all doing it, so joke's on them.
The first time I realized I will become an activist was at a camp in Rhineland, 2017. That was amazing to feel part of so many people. We're like 2,000 people. We shared this moment that we realized we're gonna go from here and we're gonna block the infrastructure, we're gonna block the coal mine today.
There was one day in December that I opened the newspaper and it said, Louisa Neubauer, climate activist. That's the day that I realized I was now a climate activist.
Me and my friends went to a US fossil fuel panel and disrupted it. We took over the stage, we took over the mic. Going into that space and disrupting it in that way was one of the first times I really felt like I had made a difference in a way that was scary and uncomfortable at first, but afterwards felt so good.
Forgive you. We are in this together.
This is our time. This is our future. And I will do whatever it takes to protect our rights, to protect our planet, and to protect our people.
The most powerful lobbies in the world and the most powerful political institutions. We won't get anywhere in chaos. The big moves, they need to be thought through. It's a David against Goliath thing here. We need to think of resources that are unique. And this is for us, it's young voices, it's young minds, it's young people who have a right to have a future. No one can take this away from them. It's the strongest argument we have.
Our goal is to convince the world to plant 1 trillion trees. And to do so, we're giving lots of speeches, creating lots of campaigns to share that message, and of course, we're planting as many trees as possible ourselves, on average 1 every 15 seconds.
We have 3 demands. Our first demand is to tell the truth. We call on the government and the media and all industries to tell the truth about the climate emergency. Our second demand is to halt biodiversity loss and bring emissions down to net zero by 2025. And our third demand is for the government to create and be led by citizens' assemblies. We will be really happy if we achieve our goals. But absolutely, there's still a lot of work that will need to be done, and we have this thing we call regenerative culture. It's about transforming the way that we live and just trying to make it better on all levels and cleaning up a lot of the mess that we've made.
I went to high school in the West Village, so just a little bit south of here, by the water, by the Hudson River. And I started working in after-school programs and started learning about environmental justice and environmental racism and how in New York, people of color and low-income communities are more likely to be harmed by climate change. And my people, the Garifuna people, being a coastal community really impacted by sea level rise. So I kind of connected those two experiences of my people in Honduras and of people who look like me in New York City. And I realized that if people that look like me are the people that are being most impacted by this crisis, that I had to do something about it.
I was diving and I'm afraid of fish. This one special moment, there was something touching my feet and I thought it was a big shark or something, but it was not. It was just a plastic bottle. And at that moment I realized that there was so much more plastic around me than fish. And I saw the plastic everywhere, on the beaches, on the streets, in my hometown, everywhere. So I realized I need to do something.
When I was a child, when I learned about climate crisis, I wanted to reduce my personal carbon footprint to the 2 tons of greenhouse gas emissions that is sustainable and that is just, speaking globally. And then something hit me, and that was that the burning of lignite in Germany is already 2.8 tons of greenhouse gas per person in Germany. So living in Germany, being a German citizen, I can't reduce my personal footprint to this amount. And that was the point when I realized it's a dead end. I need to become political. This is something we need to solve as a society, as a nation, or globally, people worldwide.
I've been an activist for quite some time. I like being involved in things, but not because I was driven in a sense, because I always felt there was a government that would, that would take care of our future, I guess. And 3 years after Paris, I was wondering why things were still going downhill, even though we had now the Paris Agreement. So I went to the climate conference in Poland. What I saw was, on the one side, masses of suit-wearing diplomats sorting out tiny paragraphs about the most irrelevant things and fighting for hours and hours, and everyone kind of pulling back, saying, well, you know, that Paris thing 3 years ago, we didn't kind of mean that. And in all those masses, there was Greta, who was somewhat the most powerful person in this entire conference.
You only talk about moving forward with the same bad ideas that got us into this mess, even when the only sensible thing to do is pull the emergency brake. You are not mature enough to tell it like it is. Even that burden you leave to us children. Thank you.
And that was a very mind-blowing experience. So I got together with her and sorted out her interviews and dates during this conference. But this didn't change my life. It changed my life when I got back and wrote this email saying, people, I had this meeting in Poland and I kind of feel we need to strike right in front of the Bundestag in Berlin next Friday. I got three quick replies from people who I'd been counting on, who all said, Luisa, well, that's a sweet idea, but we're kind of busy and it's a very short-term thing. Why don't you get back to me in February? And it was then that I felt like, okay, actually, no, we're not going to wait any longer. We need to do this now.
Es ist ein tragischer Anlass und es ist tragisch, dass es notwendig ist, dass wir hier sind. Aber dass wir das schaffen, dass wir hier sind, dass wir so viele Menschen sind, das macht Mut und das macht Hoffnung. Is that too much to ask for?
didn't hear back from Greta until 2 months later. So when she called me and said, Louisa, hey, I'm going to Brussels and Paris. Don't you want to join me? And I said, yeah, I'm up for that.
When I was in 4th grade, I saw Al Gore's movie, The Inconvenient Truth. And shortly after that, my grandfather also gave me the book accompanying the movie. I think that was the first time I ever properly read about climate change.
What gets us into trouble is not what we don't know, it's what we know for sure that just ain't so. This is actually an important point, believe it or not, because there is another such assumption that a lot of people have in their minds right now about global warming that just ain't so.
When we started planting trees 12 years ago, we didn't make a conscious decision to start a children's movement or a youth movement because we thought children and youth were particularly effective. We were just a couple of 10-year-old, 9-year-old kids at the time, so it was natural for us to start a project with other children and youth. I remember that I was more nervous than at any point before for my life, and I remember just wishing to be in school instead that day.
Thank you for making this year the International Year of Forest. Because for us children, forests are not only the livelihood of billions, but for us children, forests are our future.
Even if we used all the space, planted every square inch around the world, tree planting alone will not solve the climate crisis. It can only be one part of the solution. We like to think of it sometimes as a time joker because it still makes it possible to actually reduce our global CO2 emissions quick enough to keep global temperature rise below the 2-degree limit. But it can, of course, only work if we start planting trees right away and also start reducing CO2 emissions effectively immediately. We have to address this issue under the assumption that we won't have a miracle technology just around the corner that will solve the problem for us. The fantastic thing is we have so many amazing technologies already that if only properly implemented, they will allow us to tackle the climate crisis right now. We don't have to wait for more technology. We don't have to wait for further research. We can implement these solutions right now. And those include things like the wonderful desert tech concept of producing massive amounts of very cheap energy in global deserts that can supply us all around the world. Eating far less meat through plant-based proteins that are obviously starting to develop really quickly right now. We have all of these solutions. We only have to implement them.
We're a very diverse group, and you speak to one person, you'll hear something slightly different to the next person, but we all live by the same principles. It's a very transparent movement. There's a lot of discussion when someone has an action. Do we consider that to be non-violent? You know, how are the public perceiving that? It needs to come across as non-violent. You know, we need to make sure we're not creating a culture of fear. So there's a lot of discussion about, you know, individual actions, you know, and so we have things like the funeral procession that's really taken off and that's been used around the world now to show that we're holding a funeral for nature. So that's been really well received. The toughest thing for me probably was that first night on Waterloo Bridge. It was cold, numbers were really low, and honestly I just didn't think we were going to be there in a couple of hours' time. Police are moving in, you don't want conflict with them, you don't want conflict with anyone, you're non-violent, but you're in conflict because they're going to arrest you. That's really tough for all of us. But for me, I'd say the toughest thing is, you know, just dealing with the reality of what we're facing with climate and ecological crisis and just walking around and feeling like, where are all the people who care? Why aren't we acting on this? Why don't we have a mass response to this to stop what's happening, you know? And how do I look my children in the eyes and say, don't worry, we have this in hand, we're fixing it, you know, because we actually don't. We have no strategy for fixing it at the moment, which is what, you know, we're hoping to build.
Okay, hello everybody. My name is Roger, and I'm doing this video called Message from Prison. Okay, so the first thing to say is, That's right, I'm not in prison. If this video goes out, it will be because I'm in prison, because the plan is I'm going to be flying a drone, don't panic, at head height, well, hopefully at head height if I can control it properly, near Heathrow. Being arrested for flying a drone. At Heathrow. At Heathrow. Haven't done it yet. On conspiracy.
Yeah, mate. So just take a seat, thank you.
Roger, you only want to say shout out at all before you go in?
Take a seat.
No, whatever it takes. Thank you very much. When a house is on fire, you have to break down the door. Economic disruption is breaking down the door. It's not pretty, and no one wants to do it. You know, I just want to weed my spinach on my farm, right? I don't want to be doing this.
It does look like Roger Hallam might, suffer a long prison sentence. We as individuals still support him as a person. He's an incredible person. He's been invaluable to this movement. There's just been a protest today outside the prison where he's being held, where people have gone to support him and just show that, he's not in there alone, like he's in a lot of our hearts.
Endeglande means here and no further. And this means we're not willing to go any further beyond this red line that we are drawing. And this means that we're not willing to participate any longer in destroying the climate and destroying our common resources. We gather thousands and thousands of people from all over Europe, and we enter the coal mines and we stop the climate crisis right where it's being produced. We stop the diggers for 1 or 2 days, and that's our commitment. That's what we do to stop the climate crisis. The last thing we did was the big mass action 2019. It was in the Rhineland, end of June. Several actions all over Germany where we delegitimized the so-called coal compromise that the German government did. And our common goal is climate justice. We want not only to save what we have, but also to create a better world. It's not everyone's way to really enter into a pit mine. Some people prefer blocking a road or signing a petition. Everything is important. We're all fighting for the same thing by different means. The police is really defending these private companies that want to make profit from selling coal or gas. So we do action trainings a lot in every German city. We really tell our activists, be prepared. Also think about your personal limits when you go into an action, because these actions are they're not like a demonstration. You really go to the limits. Is a question we've been asked frequently, and we have a very clear answer to that. We have an action consensus, and this consensus is very clear on that question. It says our goal is not to harm anyone. We make very sure that we're very well prepared, we're calm, we're not escalating anything, and our actions are not directed against the police or against security. We try to live the world already we want to create.
Where does plastic come from? How did the oceans work? Where are the currents coming from? What is plastic, and since when do we use plastic? And why does it affect the ocean in that way? So I started to do a lot of research to find all these things that are focusing together. plastic is a product which is not degradable. So it's getting smaller and smaller and smaller, but it never degrades. And what happens if it's going to the ground is end up in the sediments and it's covering our whole planet. So when we look like 1,000 years in future, the people, if they get to the ground, they will find plastic. So we are going to be the plastic time. When we start eating something which is coming from the sea, there is definitely plastic inside. So we cannot avoid that plastic is entering our bodies in these times.
I grew up in the early 50s, and I remember when the disposable pen was supposed to be a miracle, and disposable paper towels. And this worried me, because I thought, where is all these disposable things gonna go? Where are these disposable razors gonna go? I was just a little girl and already worrying about these things. And now we have mountains of disposable things.
Finally, I developed a platform which could filter the ocean garbage from not the big plastic, but also all the small plastic particles. The most important thing is that all the plastic in the oceans is accumulating in these ocean garbage patches. So this is a point where we can start. And it's not just big plastic, but also small plastic particles. So what we need to do is to focus on these small plastic particles, but we cannot use nets or filter systems, because then we would harm ocean life. So we need to find another solution. The technology of the platform is working like an inverted sedimentation basin, which is a part of a sewage plant. The water is getting inside, it's getting calmed down, the sediments are going to the ground, and the platform in the oceans works definitely the other way around. Plastic is floating up to the surface because of the calmed down ocean currents. And this technology we are now adapting into smaller technologies which we can implement into rivers and estuaries, because this is a point where we can start even earlier to stop the plastic entering the oceans, so we can make a much bigger effect.
The way that capitalism is organized is that it produces already an incredible amount of completely unnecessary waste that we don't even see normally. And the reason is because companies are incentivized to sell you products that are designed to break down quickly, right? So you have to keep going back to buy more all the time. We can legislate against that practice of planned obsolescence, mandating extended warranties on products so that things like refrigerators, washing machines, cars last 40 years instead of 10 years. So you can have a massive reduction of material use in the economy without any negative consequences to people's everyday lives. But the thing to recognize here is that if you do have this reduction of material throughput in the economy, economic activity will actually shrink. Now, normally, what does that mean? It means that people get laid off, unemployment rate goes higher, poverty rates go high, there's homelessness, et cetera, et cetera. There's a recession. But it doesn't have to be that way, right? If we introduce a shorter working week, then we can make sure that everybody has a job by redistributing existing necessary labor, a 3-day weekend for everybody with a job guarantee, increase wages at the same time to make sure that we have the labor that we need to keep the economy going in its necessary sense, despite a contraction of unnecessary economic activity, right? I mean, it's ludicrous now that we have a system where we have to keep growing the economy every year simply to create new jobs, right, to mop up unemployment.
My colleagues here at ETH in Zurich created a global map of all the potential restoration areas around the world. And some of the countries with the most restoration potential, so most area where trees could be planted, include places like Russia and the United States. But at the same time, it's much more important that we start planting trees in tropical countries around the world, because these tropical countries also have a lot of restoration potential, but more importantly, when we plant trees there, they grow a lot faster. We're currently working together with the environmental program of the UN to launch our Plant for the Planet app officially in New York this September. With this app, we're bringing transparency into global reforestation efforts by allowing all tree planting projects around the world to present their work so people can discover and compare.
What Abahawi and the community have done here through a process called farmer-managed natural regeneration, or FMNR, what they've done is released that potential in the tree stumps, and they've regenerated about 930,000 trees in just the last 4 years. The technique itself is very simple. It involves reducing the number of stems growing from the tree stump so that there's less competition, and then cutting back some of the side branches so that you're releasing that growth to grow straight and tall. And the result is phenomenal. Trees grow very, very rapidly when they're pruned in that way, because very often they actually have a mature root system in the ground that's fueling the growth.
His projects is incredibly inspirational, and he really proves how effective landscape restoration can be in tackling the climate crisis.
Just about climate change. This is about our lives. This is about our future. We are suing the executive branch of the federal government for causing climate change and for violating our constitutional rights. Elected officials are meant to serve the people, meant to protect our interests, but for too long they've been protecting their pocketbooks at the expense of my generation's future. I was lucky enough after 2 years of trying to change the minds of local politicians and feeling like it wasn't working to get this opportunity to become a plaintiff on this federal lawsuit. Suing the United States federal government for the harms that it's taken against young people. So our case states that the US federal government has known since the Johnson administration, has known since the 1950s that climate change and fossil fuel development could be potentially disastrous to young people. And they've still taken direct action to create a fossil fuel energy system to make our country dependent on fossil fuels. So our argument is by doing that, they've violated our constitutional rights to life, liberty, and property. And they've disproportionately done that against young people. We have 22 experts from all over the world that agree that climate science is an issue. And once we get in the court of law, if these politicians try to deny climate science, it's perjury. It's not just climate denial, it's them being in violation of the courts.
We are talking about our lives. We are asking those individuals who seem to be putting guns to the foreheads of all youth to not only not pull the trigger, but remove your weapon. We are asking for you to understand what is at stake. The security of your children, but also the security of us. The eyes and the faces of those who are meeting with you in your house, in your building, in your institutions, to talk about what you've done and what we demand that you do to truly work for us, for the people, and for the future.
How was my Swedish? Taximaki?
Oh, taximaki.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks for being part of this.
And what I found as a young person is dealing with politicians in the United States. If you don't have voting power, a lot of the times they just pat you on the head and take a photo opportunity with you and send you on your way. It's a really hard way to make change in the political system when politicians don't listen to young people who don't vote.
The youth doesn't have any power, not in a democratic way, not in an economic way. The Foundation for Generations is a lobbyist organization for future generations and for the younger generation. We fight for generational justice. It's all about climate and ecological justice. It's about our economic system and the way we do business. And it's about global justice after all. We need radical change right now, and we need to solve the deeper problems, not just the consequences like the climate crisis or ecological crisis. We need to solve the origin, which is our economic system and the way we do business on our planet. Because the rules set by our planet are not and are not debatable. We want to draw the way to this utopia, because always when we talk about a new economic system, when we talk about the end of hunger, of poverty, whatever, we always talk about it like it was a dream. But it isn't. It can be reality.
I think that the protests are monumental and so important in changing the discourse around climate change. I mean, it's gone from a peripheral issue, I think, in people's consciousness to one that's really right at the forefront. What's interesting about the protests is that they're foregrounding the fact that it's not possible to achieve radical, rapid emissions reductions while at the same time carrying on with the economy as usual. Because the more we grow the economy, the more energy demands the economy creates. So right now, virtually every government on the planet measures economic success in terms of gross domestic product, right, GDP. And we take this measure for granted as though it's normal and natural. But in fact, it's deeply problematic, and we're widely aware of these problems. Like, basically, GDP doesn't account for the negative social and ecological costs of economic activity. So if you cut down a forest and sell the forest for tables and IKEA, then GDP goes up, but it doesn't count the cost of losing that forest as a habitat for animals or as a sinkhole for carbon, right? So we clearly need to shift to a way of measuring economic success that does account for ecological costs. Like the Genuine Progress Indicator, for example, the GPI, starts with GDP and then subtracts negative social and ecological costs. Now, when you do that, then politicians are incentivized to pursue ecological goods and social goods while minimizing bads, right? It completely changes the way that politicians and even business people pursue their interests in the economy. So even just changing the way that we measure economic success can have this knock-on effect in the way that the economy operates. That's probably the very first thing we need to do.
I think we're not gonna solve the climate crisis in harmony and just talking about it and getting people to have insights. There are people that want to see the world destroyed. And these are people you can't talk to. It's people that profit from extracting fossil fuels.
Keep it in the ground! Keep it in the ground!
Here we need to get clear. Here we need the majority, the vast majority, globally spoken, needs to rise and needs to say we need to stop these people from acting. And this is nothing we can do just by asking consent. This is something we need to do together, and we need to be very clear on that point. Otherwise, we will not succeed.
My fear with kids today starting to act, starting to realize they have to do something, my fear is that it will also go into both a useful direction and in a self-destructive direction. Already if I see people blocking streets and stuff, I know that feeling. I sat on streets and I blocked streets. There is a certain amount of self-abandonment involved. So I don't know what's in the end going to be useful. I witnessed several movements in my life. There was a peace movement, and I marched, and we all marched, and then peace got forgotten. Other things are more important to march for or became more important. 68 happened. Some of us were very much involved. I got into prison a couple of times when some of these people who were demonstrating together with us decided that violence against things and people were allowed, then we split. So that was the end of that movement as far as I was concerned.
I often wonder why am I doing this? Chances are too small, actually. And there was one time that I felt it was overwhelming. It felt almost like suffocating because this whole Weltschmerz, this whole This whole weight of climate disasters around the world was lying on my shoulders. We're doing everything we can, but we're not reaching anything. It's easy to question our effectiveness or our chances to win this. But then I realized that there's no point in running away, because you can't run away from your own future, right? Like everyone in this world, I only got this one future. And there's no point on relying on others to sort this out, because this hasn't worked out in the past decades. Why should it work out in the future? The activist thing is a bit of a lifetime contract. It's something you carry with you, I think, for a long time. When I talk to activists now who have been activists for the last 40 years, at least they tell me so. But I guess the way you express that kind of activism will change.
Wir brauchen Millionen an Menschen in diesem Land, die sich bewusst machen, dass wenn sie weiterhin schweigen, dass sie genau wie alle anderen Teil von dem Problem sind.
I hope that in 20 years' time or in 40 years' time I won't have to fight for the same causes, because then it's going to be too late.
Being an activist is not easy in today's world, because normally you have to work to have money and so on. So it's a question, how do we make a living? I'm a student, I have a living, my parents also support me, and I'm very thankful for that. Other people don't have these resources. I think what we have in common is that we just don't need much money. We live in solidarity, we live in housing projects, we don't own cars, most of us, we don't make expensive journeys to the other end of the world. We spend most of our money for this fight in the movement, because this is where we feel it belongs.
Our criteria are that the activists have a systemic perspective. That means that they don't just fight the symptoms, but that they go to the root cause of the problem. There's actually a theory by the Great Transition Initiative. What it's saying is that we have various trajectories humanity could take at this point in time, and one is the Great Transition. And we use this narrative to analyze the groups that apply for funding at the Gorilla Foundation. What the Great Transition is looking to achieve is harmony between humanity and the planet, and that we put well-being of the many before the profit of the few. I don't agree 100% with what all these groups are doing, but by and large we support their causes, otherwise we wouldn't be funding them. But we have to make sure that the money is used in line with the German laws of charitable giving, because we're a foundation that is obviously monitored by German tax authorities, so we have to make sure that everything is legal and in order. I gave a private grant to Hambacher Forst. I thought it was the craziest thing that I've ever done, give people money for ropes to build their tree houses. And I could have never imagined the effect that this could have, because eventually the Hambacher Forst became the symbol in Germany for the coal exit, which they actually then committed. So I think that showed me like the power of activism. One of the groups we recently funded is a group from the Netherlands that is actually using artistic intervention at museums to criticize art washing.
Spoils landscapes.
Large oil companies fund museums and thereby strengthen their license to operate. So this group is looking to make museums reject the money from the oil companies and to stop this art washing.
The biggest mistake that the world is making is to believe that the oil, coal, and gas industry, that the automotive industry, that the telco industry is the #1 emitter of greenhouse gas emissions. Don't get me wrong. They're still on the list, but they're much lower on the list than that of agriculture, food, and beverages, which touches every human being's life in the world, and the refrigerated trucking, the refrigerated shipping, the transport and logistics for this industry is the biggest way to make the biggest impact and to not only to draw down, but to stop and reverse global warming.
Agriculture accounts for a significant amount of carbon emissions, completely aside from the fuel that's used to power it, right? And the reason is because we have this industrial agricultural model. As you intensify your extraction from the lands through chemical-intensive industrial agriculture, soils die off, and which not only reduces the future fertility of the land, but also causes huge plumes of carbon to be released from the soil into the atmosphere. And so, the soils have become a source for carbon emissions. But that can be reversed by switching from industrial agricultural methods to more regenerative, organic, holistic soil management methods. Changing our attitude toward the soil from one that's extractive to one that's regenerative can fundamentally shift our soils from being a cause of climate catastrophe to a radical solution for climate catastrophe.
If you look at our world from outer space, we're all on the same boat. It's all our planet. Whether the emissions come from China or the US, the waters we drink, the air we breathe, is all on the same planet. And eventually there is no place on this earth you can hide from climate change. That's why it's expedient, it's something that has to happen now, a call to action now for everybody.
2030, the history books will show that faced with imminent destruction, people on the front lines fought back. That young people rose up around the world to demand immediate action. That starting on this day, September 20th, 2019, everything began to change.
In Berlin, it was about 270
people.
Es ist richtig überwältigend, was gerade hier passiert. Nicht nur in Berlin, aber auf der gesamten Welt. Wir schreiben heute Geschichte. Wir zeigen gerade heute, wie krass weit wir sind, wie sehr wir einstehen für eine gerechte und klimageschützte Welt. Und wir zeigen, dass wir nicht aufgeben, auch wenn woanders in politischen Räumen gerade verhindert wird, dass echter Klimaschutz passiert. Wir machen weiter, es wird weitere globale Streiks geben und wir zählen auf jede und jeden Einzelnen von euch heute weiter mit uns zu streiken und diese Mission fortzuführen. Weil das heute ist nicht das Ende, das ist der Anfang. Seid ihr jetzt nächstes Mal wieder dabei?
Why should we study for a future that is being taken away from us? That is being stolen for profit. And some people say we should study to become climate scientists or politicians so that we can, in the future, solve the climate crisis. But by then it will be too late. We need to do this now. Together and united, we are unstoppable. We will rise to the challenge. We will hold those who are the most responsible for this crisis accountable, and we will make the world leaders act. We can and we will. And if you belong to that small group of people who feel threatened by us, then we have some very bad news for you. Because this is only the beginning. Change is coming, whether they like it or not.
We look to our young. I look to Greta. I look to all the young people globally who are inspired and active with her at the helm. I look to my own daughter. Her and her friend Rebecca Foon started Pathway to Paris. It's called Pathway to Paris to make the Paris Accord real. And then the president cuts the ties of the Paris Accord. Was devastating. But they have a thing called 1,000 Cities Initiative to get 1,000 cities to pledge being fossil-free by a certain time, 2050, 2040, 2030, tomorrow.
When I was in school, I wasn't very interested in school. Everything I really wanted to know, I learned outside of school. For instance, I had a book with butterflies. And I had a little cahier, and I wrote in all the butterflies I had personally seen from the book. I've seen more than 100. A kid doing this today wouldn't need a big book. You can put them on one sheet of paper, the butterflies that, as a kid, you can see today. I'm pretty much ashamed that I always thought of myself. I saw them, but I didn't think of those kids. I have those kids now in the same age group. They are now 8 years old, and I can't explain them what they've lost. let alone I can't explain them what they will lose until they're adults.
I declare the signature ceremony for the Paris Agreement on Climate Change closed. Thank you.
The world's biggest problems are also the world's biggest opportunities. 170 countries come together and agreed upon anything for the first time ever. That's unheard of. And the world did it. They came together, they agreed on 1.5 degrees of warming, the Paris Agreement, and then they came up with this People Planet Protection Plan, the SDGs. It's the world's first ever global moonshot. And if we reach it, we'll have a manifesto, a beautiful, desirable future to live in.
To come to the meeting, we have said, yes, you are very much welcome to come, but you are welcome to come as a keynote listener, not as a keynote speaker. So this morning and during the town hall, you'll see a lot of ministers, a lot of powerful people, elected officials sitting in the audience, listening to young people.
Yesterday, millions of people across the globe marched and demanded real climate action, especially young people. We showed that we are united and that we, young people, are unstoppable. And I don't want to take up more of your time because I've been invited to speak in the General Assembly on Monday, so I will give the others more time to speak now and just wish you a very good day today, and I know and hope that today will be successful.
Thank you, Greta. Also, generosity in action.
I've been on climate strike every Friday for the past 41 weeks in front of the United Nations headquarters in solidarity with Greta Thunberg and the Fridays for Future movement. And it's amazing to see how much the movement has grown in only a couple of months. What I expect out of the United Nations Climate Action Summit is that they will listen to the youth and respond to our calls, demanding that they take action. With the students, if they do not take any action, it will just fuel our fire. And we will continue to take civil disobedience, demanding that they take urgent action now.
This is not a drill. My name is Greta Thunberg. We are living in the beginning of a mass extinction. Our climate is breaking down. Children like me are giving up their education to protests. But we can still fix this. You can still fix this. To survive, we need to stop burning fossil fuels. But this alone will not be enough. Lots of solutions are talked about. But what about a solution that is right in front of us? I'll let my friend George explain.
There is a magic machine that sucks carbon out of the air, costs very little, and builds itself. It's called a tree. Many people have already begun using natural climate solutions. We need to do it on a massive scale.
You can be part of this. What you do counts.
What are you saying?
I mean, I agree with everything in that video. I think the hard part is to know where to start, but I definitely see the impact of that at home. And even I just planted a garden this year, and last year had probably 50 pumpkins come out of my garden, and this year, not one. planted a tree in our yard just a few weeks ago doing our part, but I feel like in some ways it's out of our control, but it needs to be something that we can do more than plant a tree and support the efforts that are going on, but I'm not sure where to start.
It's incredibly crucial that we understand that reforestation alone will not solve the climate crisis. We also have to drastically reduce carbon emissions. And that's why I have a huge issue with companies like Exxon or Shell continuing their business model and pretending like they're part of the solution by planting trees.
So plants can be a little more like plants.
We need to plant trees while drastically reducing our carbon emissions.
This is not really ultimately a conversation about fossil fuels anymore, right? This is a conversation about how our economies run. If we switch to renewable energy, let's just imagine we get 100% renewable energy tomorrow. What are we going to do with it? The same things we're doing right now, extract and produce and consume ever more stuff every year. So you can imagine, even in a perfectly clean energy society, we still trash the planet and destroy the basis of our civilization. That's clearly irrational. And so I think that the climate movement is beginning to shift from this notion that the problem is fossil fuels to a notion that the problem is actually deeper.
It's not about saving our planet, it's about saving humanity. We are in the Anthropocene facing the sixth mass extinction. And we need to get some action on board because humanity is still taking a linear lateral path with neo-Darwinism, neoliberalism, really getting us in this modus that it's survival of the fittest, natural selection, competition, only the strong survive. That is bullshit.
We are coming very close to self-destruction. We created the world which is moving into a direction where it will become unlivable. Houses burning, but still we're debating whether this is right, this is wrong. So that is the most pressing thing needs to be done first to save the planet. If you go through the old roads, you always end up at the old destination. If you want to go to new destination, you have to build new roads. This will be a world of 3 zeros. 0 poverty, 0 unemployment, 0 net carbon emission. If we agree on that destination, now we have to build the roads.
We already live in an incredibly abundant economy in high-income nations, Germany, the US, the UK, right? The problem is not that we need more growth to improve people's lives. The problem is that new income from growth is being all locked up at the top. We can improve people's lives right now without any additional growth at all by redistributing what our economy already produces every year in terms of income. So in a way, fairness becomes the antidote to the growth imperative.
Today, economic system is built on the basis of the idea that everybody is driven by self-interest. I said, that's not a description of a human being. Human being is much bigger than that. It has a personal interest to take care of himself or herself, and it also have collective interest, which economics somehow did not include in our theory. So because of the narrow vision theory, we created a very, very difficult world for us because everybody's running after money. I said, why don't we discover ourselves as human beings, which is driven by self-interest, yes, also by collective interest. It's a natural thing. We care for our family, we care for our neighbors, we care for our home, the planet, and so on. This is natural to us. If you have a collective interest in mind, we create another kind of business. Business to solve people's problem in a business way. And we call it social business. The moment you bring social business into the picture, everything becomes simple. That's what gives me the hope. And particularly young people gives me the hope. Because they are not implanted with the dollar sign in their eyes yet.
We face a race between the timeline we have on climate breakdown and the ability of human consciousness on a mass scale to evolve. This is more than just about economic policy, more than just about energy policy. This is about human consciousness.
emotional about this summit. I feel a combination of optimism and shame, because it is in America, it's at the UN, our own president refuses to go. He's going to make his own conference at the same day, which to me is not only passive-aggressive, but vindictive.
We are here, ready to answer the call.
This is not a climate negotiating summit, because we don't negotiate with nature. This is a climate action summit.
What's your message to world leaders today?
My message is that we'll be watching you. This is all wrong. I shouldn't be up here. I should be back in school on the other side of the ocean. Yet you all come to us young people for hope. How dare you? You have stolen my dreams and my childhood with your empty words, and yet I'm one of the lucky ones. People are suffering. People are dying. Entire ecosystems are collapsing. We are in the beginning of a mass extinction, and all you can talk about is money and fairy tales of eternal economic growth. How dare you? For more than 30 years, the science has been crystal clear. How dare you continue to look away and come here saying that you're doing enough when the politics and solutions needed are still nowhere in sight? You say you hear us and that you understand the urgency. But no matter how sad and angry I am, I do not want to believe that. Because if you really understood the situation and still kept on failing to act, then you would be evil, and that I refuse to believe. The eyes of all future generations are upon you. And if you choose to fail us, I say we will never forgive you.
How did we mess up the climate crisis in the last couple of years, I think is a very, very fair question, because I don't think it's enough to simply say, and I applaud Greta Thunberg, as a person, but she says the solution is be educated, learn more. I don't see how we could not already know enough about what is happening. I think we should have already understood, as of at least 5 years ago, to be conservative, that we are in a climate crisis, and that yes, collectively, we have to undertake things that we have not done as a global society. So the fact that the last couple of years have featured more talk than action, and that the next couple of years may indeed be more of the same, is to me, disturbing would be an understatement.
Stärker zusammenführen, und das ist eine wichtige Rolle Deutschlands.
Jetzt müssen wir weiter.
I saw the speech at the United Nations, and I think she's a remarkable person, and it is amazing what she's doing. A lot of people say she is against countries or governments. I think she is helping us. We need now action on national level, and we need action on international level, here at the United Nations. That's the reason why Germany makes climate change one of their priorities in the Security Council. Our climate is in danger. And when our climate is in danger, our security is in danger. Islands are disappearing, glaciers melting, and the rainforest is in fire. It's not the time for more debates, it's a time for more decisions.
Greta, I think, really powerfully expressed all our emotions at what happened yesterday in her wonderfully powerful speech. Because I think what became most clear is that there is not a single government in the world that we can honestly look to as a leader. Not a single government that does enough. And it's just a huge tragedy that we have 197 governments all individually failing us. I think the biggest progress anywhere around the world is actually what we saw in Germany with our new climate proposal. But even that is obviously far, far less than we need. But if anyone is able to achieve meaningful change, then it is youth. Because like no one before in the last 30 years, for the first time now we have momentum, we have power, and we have governments understanding how powerful youth are, thanks to the wonderful work of Greta and all her other supporters around the world.
So we really have to think more broadly than just, throw out the politicians and bring in young people. It's a lovely idea, but we've seen in generations past what happens as the system shapes people as much as people shape the system, right? I don't deny, evolution and political evolution and progress. I'm a big believer in it. I actually think that this generation could be very, very different. I genuinely believe that. I want to believe it. And you see some evidence of that happening. But my point is it cannot simply be at the political level.
I think that's just the life that a lot of young people are coming to terms with, that we need to be activators and we need to be activists and we need to be out in the streets talking about what we want, or else we're not going to get it. And I think that we all have a lot of desperation and urgency in our hearts to get the change that we want to see, because that means the future for us.
Said that if you wanted to solve, climate change, you would end all climate summits. You would not be flying in planes and private jets to Bali and Copenhagen and Cancun and Kyoto and wherever else these summits are. You would put every penny of that and hundreds of billions, if not trillions more, into clean tech climate adaptation funds. Now, from the most rudimentary local technologies like protein-based water filtration systems to the highest level of geoengineering and firing sulfur particles into the atmosphere in order to shield the climate from further warming. We have technology, whether it's nuclear technologies, and across the board, we have the technological and the political and the economic capability to conserve our water supply, to have more efficient and organic agriculture and plant more trees. All of these things are eminently doable. It's not about knowledge. It's not about information. It's not about resources. We have to put the blame where it belongs, and that is in political commitment and coordination in deploying these solutions. And of course, time is being wasted.
I don't think I'm going to go into politics in the next 10 years because I'm now experiencing how powerful movements can be, how powerful campaigning can be, how powerful pressure on politicians can be. It would be weird to kind of throw this away. Maybe at some point. When I listen to politicians today who tell me, we're so thankful that you're doing this because finally we can do stuff, I'm like, no, you shouldn't. You should do your job. You shouldn't have to wait for us to do anything. So I don't want to sit in a parliament one day waiting for activists to get going. I'd rather be the activist myself.
All power to these kids who help all of us to be more aware and to think about what we can do. So I hope that their gusto and that their courage pushes the next generation who are now in position to move into power, that it changes their consciousness. Otherwise, it won't have any consequence. We can't wait until Greta is old enough to sit in the parliament.
Activism changed my life a lot, my daily life, because I'm really taking care of what I buy, what I consume, where I use plastic, if I use plastic at all. So I really reduced my amount of plastic a lot, and I think about the world in a completely different way. I respect everything much more than before, because everything is so important and needs to be handled with so much more respect.
People recognize on some deep level that the economy we live in is a fundamentally destructive one that is undermining the conditions for their future and their children's future. And they're ready for a change. 70 to 80% of respondents in surveys that are asked this question prioritize ecology over growth. I mean, that is a dramatic transformation, and that does give me hope.
For me personally, to be able to look my children in the eyes in a few years and just say, I'm sorry, but I did everything that I could. I did everything in my power. Even if it comes to a point where I have to give up some of my liberty, I did that for you. I'm sorry that this happened, but I did everything in my power. That's what my message will be at the moment. You know, it won't be enough. It's not a happy thought, but it's the best that we can do in this situation.
Nothing is impossible for human beings. Human beings are born to make impossibles possible. That's their mission. That's the excitement that he lives with, provided he pays attention to it. So that's the hope. Are we waking up?
I think about the future, and I can't plan my future because climate crisis is happening. And I'm 26 years old, and I will live most part of 21st century. Do I want to have children in this world? And at the moment, I think yes, because it gives me hope. And I think it means that we don't give up. I think it means that we value life. I think that we want humanity to exist in the future. I want to create a better world, and I want to have children that I can raise into this better world.